Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today we're going to be doing a deck tech on the newest hero from Outsiders, Uzuri Switchblade, an assassin hero with a pretty aggressive play style and a nice amount of disruptive tools mixed in. This deck is mostly based on the deck by Sam Dando, I believe, from the Top 8 in Chicago Brawl this past weekend. Before we hop into it, I want to first ask you to please subscribe. Only about 27% of you watching are subscribed, so make sure to hit that button. And I also want to shout out my patrons. Thank you for all the support. Subscribing to my Patreon gets you access to a regularly updated, limited review of all the cards, or rating for all the cards in Outsiders Draft, as well as a bunch of regularly updated deck lists that are all Patreon deck lists only. But let's hop into it here and look at the Uzuri deck list. So Uzuri is, this version is basically a classic REDLINE version. You can see we have 45 reds here in the list, only 9 yellows and 6 blues in the main deck here. So yeah, not a lot of resource cards in this deck, but there's kind of a few main reasons for that. Uzuri is based around the stealth mechanic, and all of the stealth cards cost 0, so you don't need resources for them. Uzuri's weapon is daggers. They cost 2 resources, but are not very strong into most matchups. So we don't really want to be pitching for them that often. They're just kind of for the later game when you maybe are going to like fatigue and you'll use them for that, or if you ever just have some extra resources hanging around. But for the most part, we're just a REDLINE deck, making advantage of some of the new powerful stealth cards, making advantage of Codex of Frailty, the new powerful card from Outsiders, and Red Death Touch, also a powerful card. Shakedown, Uzuri's specialization, is a powerful card, as well as some of the assassin cards from Dynasty, like Leave No Witnesses. So we'll get it all and look at that a bit deeper, but first I want to kind of talk about Uzuri's hero ability. This allows you to, as a reaction, banish a card from your hand face down. Then you can flip it face up. If its cost are 2 or less, you swap it with a stealth card you're currently attacking with. So it kind of lets you turn any stealth card into one of our more powerful 2-cost attacks. Doesn't cost any resources. Obviously, the stealth card is being used up, going to the bottom of your deck, so kind of is like it costs the 2 resources of using the stealth card. But there's some powerful synergies, especially with our main card we're swapping is all 9 copies of Isolate we're playing. This is the best swap card because it has Dominate. So when they're blocking, they can only block with 1 card from hand. Obviously, this doesn't prevent defense reactions later, but in terms of just regular blocking, this makes it so as long as they don't have defense reactions, you're going to be able to get in there with that 6 power attack that's coming in after using Uzuri's hero ability. So you can play any of these isolates. It doesn't really matter which one because they're going to often go to the bottom using Uzuri's hero ability. And then you can swap in, for example, Shakedown. It'll have its ability activated because you use Uzuri's hero ability. So it'll have the effect of when it hits a hero, you can choose red, yellow, or blue. Then that hero reveals their hand and you banish a card. So you basically get to make your opponent discard a card of your choice, which is pretty strong. And like I said, if you played it with an isolate first and switched it in using that, they were only able to block with 1 card. So as long as they don't have any defense reactions, this will hit for 3. And you'll be able to get the effect. So isolates are pretty big here. They're the main stealth card that's going to allow us to swap in these big attacks. Death Touch is another one you can swap in. You can also play this fairly easily from Arsenal using a Tunic counter, since it only costs 1, but it can't be played from hand, so it needs to either be from Arsenal, or you can use Uzuri's hero ability to swap it in. And then also pretty strong 6 power, and you can, when it hits, you get to pick any of the plagues to create. We're also playing Command and Conquer here, another great 6 power. This one, they can't even play defense reactions. So once it's on the chain link, if they didn't play a defense reaction beforehand, they can't anymore. So this one is even better to hit. And then the only other good one we have really is the Surgical Extraction. This one's a little less damage, just 4. We're often using it just for the blue or for the 3 block. But if you need to, I mean, it's a pretty good effect. It does make your opponent, you can banish a card from their hand. So still a pretty strong effect, but a little low on the damage side on this one, mostly because it's a blue. Looking at the kind of rest of our red cards here, we've got 2 Backstab. This is another red stealth card. It doesn't have the same synergy with our hero ability like all of the isolates do, but it does have an amazing text that says defense reactions can't be played to backstab's chain link. And this is pretty huge for any of our attack reactions. So we've got Razor's Edge here, gives us stealth +3. We've also got 2 copies of Spike with Blood Rot. So in combination with these, you can play the attack reactions on top of the backstab, and the opponent's not going to have any time to be able to defense react and stop it. So it's kind of the main card that we're going to use in combination with these Spike with Blood Rots and these Razor's Edge. Cut Down to Size is another one of our 2 costs here. This is another 6 power. We're only playing 2 because it's kind of the weakest of them all. It does have the effect of when it hits, if your opponent still has 4 or more cards in hand, they discard a card. So not as easy to make them lose cards. They just have to block with one thing, but it's still a decent amount of power. And against aggro decks that really don't want to block, this can still often take a card. We went over Touchdown or Death Touch, but we got to look at E-Strike. This is another great red line card. It can turn 2 cards into 5 draw a card, 7 damage, or 5 go again. All pretty great modes. We're playing all of the 4 block defense reactions in 3 Sink Below and 3 Fate for Scene. Gives us a bit of defensive capabilities, and they're 0 cost reds, so they kind of work with the theme. We're playing all of the plague-based red stealth cards. So we've got Blood Rot Pox. This is basically a 0 for 5 if it hits, so pretty good there. Sedate is a really good one, giving inertia, especially good into certain classes like Icelander or Ranger. And then we've got Wither here. This one's really good into any deck that has weapons they want to attack with a lot, or is using a lot of attacks from Arsenal. So all pretty good. We're playing the reds of all of them for the best rate, and then we can combine them with these Razor's Edge or these Spike with Blood Rots to make them hit. Or if we don't think they're going to hit, we can even swap them out for a 2 cost or 1 cost here to get it over the edge. Leave No Witness is a great card from Dynasty. A 0 for 4, and if it hits, your opponent banishes 1 card in their arsenal. So pretty good arsenal disruption. This deck has a lot of ways to disrupt the arsenal, with 3 Command and Conquer, 3 Leave No Witness, and 3 Codex of Frailty that can let us get 1 back. So really good matchup into Rangers for the most part. You're just going to be able to mess up their arsenal basically every turn with 9 ways to destroy arsenal. So really good there. Ravenous Rabble is basically required in redline decks. This card is almost always a 0 for 4 since we're on so many reds. And then I think the only cards we really have left to go over here is the loadout. And these last few, we've got Codex of Frailty. This is already been talked about a lot, probably the best card out of Outsiders. You make sure it's always the last card in your hand when you play it, so you're not discarding a card, and it lets you grab anything to put into your arsenal. You get that Ponder token, the opponent gets a Frailty. Really powerful to get any attack you want, and like I said, make sure it's your last card so that you're not having to discard anything with it. And then we've got Yellow Shred, I think is the last card to talk about in the main deck here. This is a yellow, so you can pitch it for your daggers if you want. Yellows are also good to pitch for our 2 cost if we just want to play them straight up. So yellows are pretty versatile in this deck. It's also a 3 block, and it has the effect of giving, if this is target card, defending an assassin attack, gets -3 this combat chain. So kind of a weird type of attack reaction actually, where it's subtracting defense from a blocking card that's blocking your assassin card. But in the end, it's basically trading 1 card for 1 card. Because if they're blocking with a 3 block, this gets rid of that 3 block. But it can even work on temper equipment by destroying that equipment straight up. So has a few other uses there, but it's mostly a 3 block yellow that can kind of trade card for card with our opponent there. So that's the main deck. Let's look at the loadout real quick. So the main dagger we're always playing here is Spider's Bite. I think this is going to be played in almost every matchup. We're having a secondary dagger that we've got in the sideboard that we'll pick from. But this one's great. Most decks in the game use some level of attack actions, and this makes it so their attack actions, have -1 while defending. So nice effect there. You can just use it whenever you've got extra yellows or blues. You're not prioritizing it because it's so expensive. 2 resources for only 1 damage isn't great. It's only good in certain matchups, like into slower decks like Oldham, for example. Black Tech Whispers are our assassin legs. This is a really good equipment. It blocks for 1, and then later on you can use it to attack react and make your next assassin card have the effect of when it hits, it gains a go again. So kind of like Snapdragon Scalers that block for 1, but you can even get them back by destroying 2 silver, We don't have a ton of ways to get silver, but we can often get it with Leave No Witness. All this has to do is banish red cards. And, a lot of people play a lot of red cards, so you're usually going to be able to get at least 2 silver off of Leave No Witness, and then sometimes even off of the Surgical Extraction. So you'll probably get about 2 uses out of this, which is still really good. That's 2 block and go again twice. It's pretty good. Crown of Providence, just a classic generic headpiece here. Pretty strong, blocks 2, lets us filter our arsenal. And with the Ponder tokens we're getting from Codex, sometimes we're not going to get the best arsenal. Flick Knives, this is a way to turn our daggers, especially when they're too expensive, into damage. It also is unblockable damage that lets us close out the game. And in the worst case scenario, it blocks for 1, which is still not that bad. And then Tunic, of course, this card's great, especially in combination with Death Touch here. This is really good to play. Just activate Tunic, get that resource, play Death Touch from Arsenal. Is a really, really powerful, just basically 1 card, 8 damage play. Now the other daggers we have to choose from is Scale Peeler. This is good against any deck that uses a lot of equipment to block with. It's especially good against Oldhim, for example, because they block with Rampart a lot. When this hits, defending equipment have -1 the next time they would defend this turn. Pretty strong effect there, so this is good into anything you think is going to block with a lot of equipment. And then Nerve Scalpel is maybe the more common one. It gives the next reaction -1 while defending. What you can do with this is if your opponent plays a defense reaction, you can use Flick Knives before the defense reaction resolves, and then you can give that defense reaction -1. Usually Flick Knives doesn't work in this way because if they're already blocking with it, it won't subtract the blocking, but I think it works in the way where if the defense react hasn't resolved yet, you can get it to get -1 with Nerve Scalpel. So pretty nice effect there to make their D-reacts a little less valuable, and just can decrease D-reacts in general. So pretty nice effect. We've got the Arcane Lantern into any of the arcane damage matchups where we can just switch this out for one of our daggers. We don't, attack with them much anyways, like I said. Snapdragon Scalers is for any decks that are going to block us out, like Oldhim, because our Black Tech Whisperer legs do require the attack to hit to get go again, and if they're blocking us out, you're usually not going to hit. So this can be helpful to get around that. And then Vambrace, I think, is mostly just for Oldhim, but it's very important in that matchup, and you definitely need to have it. We've got a few more D-reacts, and that's all you got. It's a nice yellow, so we can pitch it for our 2-cost or our daggers, and it helps in the aggro matchup a little. We've got Blue Shred for some extra blues against any kind of ice deck. We've got Red Shred for anyone that's using a lot of defense reactions against us. We can give them -4, so it trades 1 for 1 with stuff like Sink Below and Fate Foreseen. And then we've got the Spicy Fabled here. This is definitely not required, but any matchups that go really long, you might be able to get 2 or 3 uses out of this, and then it's really powerful to be able to get, potentially 2 or 3 Blood Rot Pox for free on your opponent. So, for example, once again, that Oldhim matchup, Guardians, sometimes even Icelander. This is pretty good. You don't want it against anything that you block a lot, or you're not going to see it more than once. So, like aggro decks, it's going to just hurt you because it doesn't block. So, definitely not required, but a nice tool to have against any kind of matchup that goes long. So pretty powerful deck. It's maybe a little weak to ice sometimes because of the lack of blues, but the only deck that reliably gives a lot of frostbites anymore is Icelander and then Ice Lexi, so not a ton of those matchups. It's really great into Ranger, which is pretty popular right now, so good into Fuseless Lexi, good into Riptide, good into Azalea, and then it has a lot of great matchups across the board. And without Oldhim having Winter's Wail anymore, he can't really give this Frostbites reliably either. So it doesn't even have that bad of an Oldhim matchup. So pretty powerful deck. I've really been enjoying playing it. And if you want to still play the really powerful new stuff like Death Touch and Codex of Frailty, but you don't want to play Ranger, I definitely recommend this deck. It's a really fun, kind of aggressive, disruptive play style. I just want to talk about the price though a little. Obviously, it's a more expensive deck here. We've got $1,600 is pretty pricey. So some budget options. You could get Mask of Perdition as the headpiece. I think that's a pretty cheap Majestic for Assassins. You could also do Arcanite Skullcap, or you could do Ironrot headpiece. Instead of Tunic, you could do Heartened Crossstrap that lets you play one of your 2 costs for free. Instead of Flick Knives, you could do Goliath Gauntlet. That's another way to buff up your 2 costs. And then instead of Black Tech Whisperers, you could just stick with the Snapdragon Scalers. All the weapons are pretty cheap, so you can keep all of those.
You definitely don't need the Fabled. You could just cut that for basically anything. Probably just another blue is fine. Everything else is fairly cheap. You do kind of need the Vambrace for the Oldhim matchup, but that card's still pretty cheap. The most expensive stuff is going to be the Codex of Frailties you're going to need. You definitely don't need these expensive surgical extractions. So if you don't have these, you can play Yellow Ravenous Rabbles, and that's pretty good. So I would play Yellow Ravenous Rabble over Surgical Extraction. So we'll just see. Let's see how much it is if we make all of those cuts. Because you can cut all those cards in the deck will still be pretty strong on a budget. So we're going to cut all of that, cut these Surgical Extractions, cut this. No, not add it to deck. We're going to remove it. And then, let's see, I wonder, 610. So you can cut $1,000 off pretty easy. The 610 is mostly going to be from these Command and Conquers, the E-Strikes, and those are both pretty staple cards, though, so they'll be good to have. And then the Codex of Frailties are pretty expensive, too. They're about 40 a piece, but you can cut about $1,000 off right there, just cutting all of those cards out. But a lot of those are staples. Command and Conquer, E-Strike, and the Tunic are all, these are all staple cards, Crown of Providence, so you'll be able to use them in a lot of decks. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you're playing at your first few armories of Outsiders in the comments below. I appreciate all of your support. I'll see you next time.